Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Gonzalez-Morales, and today I'll be talking about my research project. It's called Te Apoyamos, which means we support you. And it's preventing suicide training and the efficacy when we translated it into Spanish. So a little bit of background. So according to the World Health Organization, a person dies by suicide about every 40 seconds. And specifically in Hispanic communities in the US in the years 2010 through 2020, suicide rates increased by 35.7% in males and 40.6% in females. And so what my project was over, it was the hashtag WSU We Support You Preventing Suicide Training, and how we studied its efficacy when we translated it into Spanish. And so originally this is an evidence-based training, and it's part of an initiative to visibly promote mental wellness, create a culture of increased awareness, and reduce the stigma around suicide. So here, the study will highlight the effectiveness of the WSU We Support You Preventing Suicide Training when we translated it into Spanish, and we administered it to those who have little to no English literacy. So how we went about this was we had to submit an IRB and get approved for that. And then we determined our sample size to be 50. And then a little bit about the Suspenders for Hope suicide training was that it is already something that's implemented here on campus, and it's already been shown to increase, I guess, awareness and knowledge around suicide. But it's not something that you commonly see in communities that don't speak English. So that's why I was particularly interested in how would this work out if we presented it to people who have little to no English literacy. And so after the training, a pre-test post-test survey was taken by the participants in Spanish via Qualtrics. So these are the questions that I analyzed before and after the training. So as you can see, it says, rate how much you agree. I know the signs and symptoms that indicate someone may be struggling with suicidal thoughts, how aware you are of resources for those struggling with suicidal thoughts or feelings. If someone was struggling with suicidal thoughts, how comfortable, I guess, would you be to say or do something to try and help them? And then if somebody were struggling with suicidal thoughts or feelings, do you know resources you could connect them to? And so those are all things that we try to, I guess, get people who take the training to leave with more awareness of these four things. And so here are my results. So the first one compares the pretest and post-test questions. And then the table 2 compares those who have taken the training, a similar training before, and those who haven't. And so basically, what we can see in table 1 is that the critical t-value for question 3 is outside of that confidence interval. And for table 2, the critical t-value for those before the training also falls outside of that confidence interval. So basically what ended up, I guess, being the results for the null hypothesis, it was that there would be no difference between participant perception of their knowledge before and after the training. And so we found that out for questions 1, 2, and 4, that there was no statistically significant difference between the participants' pre-test and post-test responses. So question 1 was knowledge of signs and symptoms. Question 2 and 4 were about awareness of resources. But for question 3, it was found to be statistically significant. And so that was a question over intention of helping. And so participants reported that they were more likely to say something or try to help someone who was dealing with suicidal thoughts or feelings after the training. And so to conclude, some of the limitations that I came across were the number of participants. I know when recruiting, it had to be kind of outside recruiting in the community, simply because our target population wasn't really here at the university. So we had to kind of lean on community partners to kind of get the word out and kind of bring in people who had little to no English literacy who wanted to take this training. And so for future research, I didn't get to do this part yet, but qualitative coding of the feedback they gave us and how we can incorporate that into future trainings. So that was also a big part of it. My references. And then this study was supported by the McNair Scholars and the Kansas State Department of Aging and Disability Services. I'd like to thank Dr. Marcy Young and Danette for their guidance and support through this whole project. Like Audrey mentioned, I'm a biomedical engineering student, so stepping into the social sciences was something very different for me. But yeah, that concludes our presentation.
I'll bring a microphone around and ask you your question.
If you were to undertake this project again, 1, what would you do different? And number 2, what kind of impact did the research have on you?
So I think something that I would do differently would be starting to recruit more early and kind of also taking a part in that recruiting. I'm not from Wichita, Kansas, so I don't know a lot of community partners. So that's something I do differently, like get out there and know the community more personally and see how I can recruit more participants. As for the second part of that question, I think something I took away from this whole project was that there is more need to implement mental health resources and I guess general health resources for like Spanish communities, because oftentimes, even though they're like some of the resources we get are literally translated, a lot of the times some Hispanics, even though it's in Spanish, sometimes the literacy level is still their literacy level is still low, so they don't understand still, even though it's in Spanish. So just being conscious of you shouldn't really literally be translating word for word. It's more like getting the meaning across. So that's something that kind of opened my eyes to needing that.
So in your research, question 3 was the only one that had significance in your results. What do you think about this, given that it was the only one that showed a significant difference? And then are resources presented in this training so that they can utilize them, or is it just kind of an overview type of training?
So yes, for this training, after we do the training, we do give a variety of resources that are in the Wichita area. And as for question 3, it was the only one that did have a statistically significant difference. And I think that is very important because, I mean, it says that if somebody were to exhibit these signs and symptoms, that you would, find a way to help. And so I think intention is a big part of it. And as for the other three, I think that kind of gives me feedback on like what I can improve on how to present the material. So maybe people are grasping it better also. And, you know, they get more, I guess, knowledge and awareness of the other three.
I was just wondering if the translation was provided to them only in written form, or was it also translated orally to them?
So yeah, so a little bit about the training is that it's PowerPoint. And so these trainings are held in sessions. And so it's PowerPoint. And then I'd be verbally walking through that PowerPoint. But yeah.
Did you ever get any indications that perhaps the training needed to be altered slightly to take into account cultural differences in attitudes towards suicide?
Yeah, we did take into account that. I know that, and I think that's one of the reasons why we had a little bit of participants, just because mental health in Hispanic communities kind of has a negative outlook toward it. But that's kind of what we want to do with these trainings is kind of, you know, destigmatize that outlook on mental health awareness and suicide and those kinds of things.